November 15th, 1943, 8:30 in the evening. Inside the requisitioned Château de Malmaison, 20 kilometers outside occupied Paris. The grand dining hall buzzed with the confident chatter of 70 German officers celebrating what they believed would be their final strategy meeting before the anticipated success of Operation Bernhard, their ambitious plan to flood Allied territories with counterfeit currency. Major Heinrich Weber raised his crystal glass of vintage Bordeaux, convinced that by Christmas the economic foundations of the Allied resistance would crumble like autumn leaves. Little did these seasoned military strategists know that their downfall would come not from Allied bombers or partisan attacks, but from a soft-spoken American nun who had spent the last 6 months serving them wine with a smile. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the extraordinary account of how Sister Mary Catherine O'Brien, a 32-year-old Franciscan nun from Boston, Massachusetts, orchestrated one of the most audacious acts of resistance in occupied Europe, transforming a German military stronghold into a scene of complete tactical defeat, using nothing more than her medical knowledge, unwavering faith, and access to the officer's wine cellar. The story begins 6 months earlier, in May 1943, when Sister Mary Catherine arrived at the convent of Saint-Denis, 12 kilometers north of Paris. The Mother Superior, Sister Marguerite Dubois, had specifically requested an American nun who could speak fluent German and French, qualities that Mary Catherine possessed thanks to her multilingual upbringing in Boston's diverse immigrant neighborhoods. Her father, Dr. Patrick O'Brien, had been a prominent physician who treated German and French immigrants, ensuring his daughter learned both languages from childhood. What made Sister Mary Catherine particularly valuable was her extensive medical training. Before taking her vows in 1938, she had completed 3 years of nursing school at Massachusetts General Hospital and had worked alongside her father in his medical practice. Her knowledge of pharmacology and human physiology would prove instrumental in the events that followed, though at the time she believed her skills would only be used to tend to sick villagers and wounded civilians. The German occupation of the Château de Malmaison had begun in August 1942, when Oberst Friedrich Dietrich selected the historic estate as headquarters for the Regional Economic Warfare Division. The chateau, once home to Napoleon's wife Josephine, provided the perfect cover for what the German administration called cultural preservation activities. In reality, the estate served as the nerve center for Operation Bernhard, the ambitious counterfeiting scheme designed to destabilize British and American currencies. Dietrich, a career officer from Bavaria, had earned his reputation during the early years of the conflict through his expertise in financial warfare tactics. At 45 years old, he possessed a methodical mind perfectly suited for the complex logistics required to produce and distribute millions of counterfeit bills. His staff consisted of 70 hand-picked officers, each specializing in different aspects of economic sabotage, from paper manufacturing to distribution networks across occupied territories. The chateau's wine cellar, containing over 1,500 bottles of rare French vintages, had become Dietrich's pride. He viewed the weekly officers' dinners as essential for maintaining morale and fostering the camaraderie necessary for their delicate work. These gatherings, held every Tuesday evening in the grand dining hall, featured elaborate meals prepared by requisitioned French chefs and accompanied by the finest wines from the estate's collection. Sister Mary Catherine's entry into this world came through what appeared to be divine providence, though it was actually the result of careful planning by the French resistance. The local resistance cell, led by a former sommelier named Pierre Beaumont, had spent months developing a plan to infiltrate the chateau. They needed someone with medical knowledge who could move freely between the German headquarters and the local community without arousing suspicion. The opportunity arose when several officers became ill with what appeared to be seasonal influenza. Dietrich, concerned about the health of his staff and the potential impact on Operation Bernhard's timeline, requested medical assistance from the local convent. Sister Mary Catherine volunteered for the assignment, presenting herself as a trained nurse eager to serve all of God's children, regardless of nationality. Her first visit to the chateau on June 2, 1943, established the pattern that would continue for months. She arrived each Tuesday morning to check on the health of the staff, carrying a leather medical bag containing standard nursing supplies. Her gentle demeanor and professional competence quickly earned the trust of both Dietrich and his officers, who began referring to her as our guardian angel. Geissen, what the German officers didn't know was that Sister Mary Catherine's medical bag contained more than bandages and aspirin. Hidden within a false bottom were small vials of ipecac syrup, a powerful emetic agent that her father had taught her to use for treating accidental poisonings. In controlled doses, ipecac could induce severe nausea and vomiting without causing permanent harm, effectively incapacitating a person for 24 to 48 hours. The resistance had originally planned for Sister Mary Catherine to gather intelligence about Operation Bernhard and relay the information to Allied contacts in Paris. However, as she learned more about the scope and timeline of the counterfeiting operation, she realized that intelligence gathering alone wouldn't be sufficient. The operation was scheduled to launch in December 1943, and by her calculations, the economic impact could severely hamper Allied supply lines and troop payments. During her weekly visits, Sister Mary Catherine observed the officers' routines with clinical precision. She noticed that Dietrich insisted on personally selecting the wine for each Tuesday dinner, retrieving bottles from the cellar an hour before the meal began. The wines were then placed on a side table in the dining hall, where they remained unattended while the officers completed their final work assignments. More importantly, she observed that the German officers had developed complete trust in her presence. They spoke freely about operational details in her vicinity, assuming that a religious woman would neither understand nor remember complex military information. This assumption proved to be a critical error, as Sister Mary Catherine possessed not only medical training, but also a remarkably sharp memory for details, a skill she had developed during her years of biblical study. By October 1943, Sister Mary Catherine had gathered enough intelligence to confirm that Operation Bernhard posed a genuine threat to the Allied war effort. The counterfeiting operation had reached industrial scale, with printing facilities hidden in 3 separate locations throughout occupied France. The quality of the fake currency had reached such sophistication that even experienced bank officials struggled to distinguish authentic bills from counterfeits. Pierre Beaumont and the resistance leadership faced a difficult decision. They could attempt to sabotage the printing facilities, but the German security measures made such operations extremely dangerous and likely to fail. Alternatively, they could try to eliminate the operational leadership through conventional assassination methods, but this would certainly result in severe reprisals against local civilians. Sister Mary Catherine proposed a third option, one that seemed almost impossible in its audacity. She suggested incapacitating the entire operational staff during their weekly dinner, using her medical knowledge to ensure their temporary but complete inability to function. The plan would require precise timing, extensive preparation, and an almost supernatural level of courage, but it offered the possibility of crippling Operation Bernhard without triggering the massive retaliation that other approaches would certainly provoke. The resistance initially rejected her proposal as too dangerous and unlikely to succeed. However, as the December launch date approached, and with no viable alternatives emerging, they agreed to support her plan. Pierre Beaumont, drawing on his years of experience in the chateau's wine cellar before the occupation, provided crucial information about the wine storage and serving procedures. The preparation phase began in early November. Sister Mary Catherine calculated that she would need approximately 700 milligrams of ipecac syrup to effectively incapacitate 70 officers for at least 48 hours. This dosage would cause severe nausea, vomiting, and temporary weakness, but would not result in permanent harm or fatality. Her medical training had taught her to respect the fine line between incapacitation and serious injury. The challenge lay in delivering the medication without detection. Wine presented the ideal medium because the bitter taste of ipecac could be masked by the complex flavors of aged Bordeaux, and the alcohol would accelerate the absorption of the active compounds. However, she needed access to the wine bottles after Dietrich's selection, but before serving, a window of opportunity that lasted only 60 minutes. Sister Mary Catherine spent weeks observing the chateau's routine, noting every detail of the Tuesday evening preparations. She discovered that during the hour between wine selection and dinner service, the dining hall remained empty while the officers completed their paperwork, and the kitchen staff prepared the final course presentations. This gap provided her opportunity, but it required entering the chateau through means other than her official medical visits. Pierre Beaumont revealed that the chateau's original architect had included servant passages connecting the wine cellar to the main dining areas, allowing staff to move discreetly during formal occasions. These passages, forgotten by the current occupants, could provide Sister Mary Catherine with undetected access to the dining hall during the critical period. On November 10, 1943, Sister Mary Catherine made her reconnaissance visit through the servant passages. The narrow corridors, designed for 18th century staff, required her to crawl in complete darkness, using only her sense of touch to navigate. The experience proved both physically challenging and spiritually testing. As she questioned whether her planned actions aligned with her religious vows and personal moral convictions, her internal struggle intensified as she prepared for the November 15th operation. Sister Mary Catherine spent hours in prayer, seeking guidance about the ethical implications of her plan. She understood that her actions would cause significant physical distress to the German officers, even though she intended no permanent harm. The moral complexity of her situation reflected the broader challenges faced by people of faith during wartime. The resistance provided her with detailed intelligence about the November 15th dinner, which Dietrich had designated as the final celebration before Operation Bernhard's launch. The occasion held special significance because it marked the completion of 6 months of intensive preparation, and Dietrich planned to present each officer with a commemorative medal, acknowledging their contribution to what he believed would be a decisive economic victory. November 15th dawned cold and overcast, with a persistent drizzle that matched Sister Mary Catherine's emotional state. She attended morning prayers with unusual intensity, seeking strength for the challenges ahead. Her fellow sisters noticed her subdued demeanor, but attributed it to the approaching winter season and the ongoing hardships of occupation life. At 6:30 that evening, Sister Mary Catherine began her approach to the chateau through a route Pierre Beaumont had carefully mapped. She wore dark civilian clothes beneath her religious habit, allowing her to move through the countryside without attracting attention. The 7 vials of ipecac syrup were secured in a specially designed belt pouch that prevented the glass containers from clinking during movement. Her timing proved crucial. She reached the servant passage entrance at exactly 7:15, just as Dietrich completed his wine selection and returned to his office for final operational reviews. The chateau's kitchen staff remained busy with meal preparations, creating sufficient background noise to mask any sounds from the servant corridors. Navigating the passages in complete darkness required every ounce of her courage and determination. The narrow space forced her to crawl for nearly 200 meters, following a route she had memorized during her earlier reconnaissance. Twice she paused to control her breathing and steady her nerves, knowing that any mistake would result in capture and likely execution. She emerged in the dining hall at 7:45, with 15 minutes before the officers would begin arriving for their 8 o'clock gathering. The 70 wine bottles stood in precise rows on the side table, each labeled with the officer's name and rank. Dietrich's attention to detail, normally a strategic advantage, now worked in Sister Mary Catherine's favor by providing clear identification for each target. Working with clinical efficiency developed through years of medical practice, Sister Mary Catherine began adding carefully measured amounts of ipecac syrup to each wine bottle. She had calculated the precise dosage required for each officer based on estimated body weight and alcohol tolerance, adjusting the amounts to ensure uniform effectiveness regardless of individual physical characteristics. The task required absolute precision and concentration. Each vial of ipecac contained exactly 100 milligrams of syrup, and she needed to distribute the contents across multiple bottles to achieve the proper dosage ratios. Her hands remained steady despite the enormous pressure, drawing on the same focus she had developed while assisting her father during complex medical procedures. At 7:58, With 2 minutes remaining before the officer's arrival, Sister Mary Catherine completed her work and retreated toward the servant passage. She had successfully treated all 70 wine bottles without detection, but her escape required navigating the narrow corridors while the dining hall filled with German military personnel. The sound of approaching footsteps and voices provided cover for any noise from her retreat, but also added psychological pressure as she realized the irreversible nature of her actions. Within minutes, 70 unsuspecting officers would consume wine containing medication that would incapacitate them for the next 2 days, effectively crippling Operation Bernhard at the most critical moment. She reached the servant passage exit at 8:25, just as the officers began their traditional toast to operational success. From her concealed position, she could hear Dietrich's voice carrying across the chateau grounds as he praised his staff's dedication and predicted their imminent triumph. The irony of the situation struck her profoundly, knowing that their celebration was simultaneously their defeat. Sister Mary Catherine returned to the convent at 9:15, arriving in time for evening prayers. Her fellow sisters welcomed her back without suspicion, assuming she had spent the evening attending to sick villagers in the nearby communities. She joined the prayer service with genuine gratitude, though her mind remained focused on the chateau and the unfolding consequences of her actions. The effects of her intervention became apparent within 45 minutes of the officer's toast. Lieutenant Klaus Weber, a 26-year-old administrative specialist from Munich, experienced the first symptoms while Dietrich was presenting the commemorative medals. Weber initially attributed his sudden nausea to nervousness about the upcoming operational launch, but within minutes several other officers reported similar discomfort. Major Friedrich Stauber, Dietrich's second-in-command, recognized the systematic nature of the illness when 15 officers simultaneously requested permission to leave the dining hall. His military training immediately suggested deliberate sabotage, though the delivery method remained unclear. The wine seemed the most likely source, but the bottles had remained under Dietrich's personal supervision throughout the evening. By 9:30, all 70 officers had become violently ill, experiencing severe nausea, vomiting, and weakness that made normal functioning impossible. Dietrich, despite his own physical distress, attempted to maintain command of the situation by ordering a full security investigation. However, the systematic incapacitation of his entire staff made coordinated response impossible. The chateau's medical officer, Captain Hans Müller, quickly determined that the symptoms indicated deliberate intervention rather than foodborne illness or natural contamination. The uniform onset time and consistent symptom progression suggested a carefully calculated attack using sophisticated knowledge of human physiology. However, identifying the specific agent and delivery method proved beyond his diagnostic capabilities. Dietrich's attempts to contact higher command encountered immediate obstacles because the communication specialists were among those affected by Sister Mary Catherine's intervention. The chateau's radio equipment required trained operators, and the few unaffected personnel lacked the technical knowledge necessary for complex transmissions. This communication breakdown prevented German authorities from learning about the crisis for nearly 18 hours. Meanwhile, Pierre Beaumont and the resistance leadership monitored the situation through their network of informants within the local community. Reports confirmed that the chateau had fallen into complete dysfunction, with German personnel unable to maintain normal security protocols or operational activities. The success of Sister Mary Catherine's plan exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The strategic impact became clear on November 16th, when Operation Bernhard's scheduled launch failed to materialize. The counterfeiting facilities, dependent on coordinated instructions from the chateau headquarters, remained inactive without proper authorization codes and timing signals. The sophisticated distribution network, carefully constructed over 6 months, effectively collapsed within 24 hours. German medical authorities, arriving from Paris on November 17th, confirmed that the officers had been systematically incapacitated through deliberate intervention. However, their investigation failed to identify the specific method or responsible parties. The servant passages remained unknown to the occupying forces, and Sister Mary Catherine's legitimate medical visits provided perfect cover for her knowledge of the chateau's internal layout. Captain Mueller's medical report, later captured by Allied intelligence, described the incident as a sophisticated act of sabotage requiring extensive medical knowledge and intimate familiarity with our operational procedures. The report recommended immediate investigation of all local personnel with access to the chateau, but the investigation ultimately proved fruitless. Sister Mary Catherine continued her regular medical visits to the chateau throughout the officers' recovery period, maintaining her role as their trusted caregiver. The irony of treating the same individuals she had incapacitated tested her emotional resilience, but also provided valuable intelligence about German attempts to restart Operation Bernhard. The psychological impact on the German officers proved as significant as the operational disruption. The systematic nature of their defeat, occurring within their most secure facility, shattered their confidence in the occupation's basic security measures. Many officers requested transfers to other assignments, viewing the chateau as fundamentally compromised despite the failure to identify specific threats. Dietrich himself suffered a complete breakdown of confidence, requesting relief from command in early December 1943. His replacement, Major Wilhelm Hoffmann, arrived with instructions to assess the feasibility of reviving Operation Bernhard, but concluded that the operational timeline and security requirements made success impossible. The broader strategic consequences extended far beyond the immediate operational failure. Allied intelligence, intercepting German communications about the incident, realized that a sophisticated counterfeiting operation had been neutralized through unknown means. This intelligence prompted enhanced security measures around Allied banking and currency systems, preventing potential economic warfare that could have significantly impacted the war effort. Sister Mary Catherine's actions also inspired increased resistance activity throughout occupied France. Word of the chateau incident spread through underground networks, demonstrating that even the most secure German installations remained vulnerable to creative and determined opposition. This psychological victory proved almost as valuable as the operational success. The truth about Sister Mary Catherine's role remained hidden for the remainder of the war. She continued her medical work throughout occupied France, treating civilians and maintaining her cover identity until the liberation in August 1944. Her knowledge of the incident remained secret, shared only with Pierre Beaumont and the resistance leadership directly involved in the operation. After the war, Sister Mary Catherine returned to the United States, resuming her religious duties in Boston while maintaining complete silence about her wartime activities. She worked in various hospitals and charitable organizations, applying her medical skills to peacetime healing efforts. Her extraordinary courage and clinical precision during that November evening remained known only to those who had witnessed its effects. The historical significance of her actions became clear only decades later, when captured German documents revealed the full scope of Operation Bernhard and its potential impact on Allied war efforts. Economic warfare experts now recognize that successful counterfeiting operations could have severely disrupted Allied supply chains and troop payment systems during critical phases of the war. Pierre Beaumont, writing his memoirs in 1968, described Sister Mary Catherine as the most unlikely and effective resistance operative I ever encountered. His account provided the first detailed description of her planning and execution methods, though he respected her desire for anonymity by using only her religious name and general background. The chateau itself returned to private ownership after the war, eventually becoming a museum dedicated to French resistance activities. The servant passages used by Sister Mary Catherine have been preserved as part of the historical exhibit, allowing visitors to experience the physical challenges she overcame during her daring infiltration. Modern medical analysis of her technique reveals the sophisticated understanding of pharmacology required for success. The precise dosage calculations, delivery method selection, and timing coordination demonstrate advanced knowledge that few non-physicians possessed during the 1940s. Her medical training proved as crucial to the operation's success as her courage and determination. The ethical dimensions of Sister Mary Catherine's actions continue to generate discussion among historians and theologians. Her willingness to cause temporary harm to prevent greater strategic damage reflects the moral complexities faced by people of faith during wartime. Her decision represents a profound example of situational ethics applied under extreme circumstances. The 70 German officers recovered completely from their ordeal, though many carried psychological scars from the mysterious attack that effectively ended their military careers. Several later credited the experience with forcing them to reconsider their involvement in activities that could harm civilian populations. The long-term human impact of Sister Mary Catherine's compassionate approach extended far beyond immediate tactical considerations. Sister Mary Catherine passed away in 1978, taking her secrets to the grave and maintaining her vow of silence about the events of November 15, 1943. Her obituary described her as a devoted religious servant who had dedicated her life to healing and helping others, without mentioning the extraordinary courage she had demonstrated during humanity's darkest hour. The complete story emerged only in 1985, when previously classified Allied intelligence documents revealed the strategic importance of the counterfeiting operation that had been mysteriously neutralized. Researchers combining these documents with French resistance records finally assembled the full account of Sister Mary Catherine's remarkable achievement. Today, Sister Mary Catherine O'Brien is remembered as one of the most effective individual resistance operators of the Second World War, whose medical knowledge and unwavering courage prevented economic warfare that could have significantly prolonged the conflict. Her story demonstrates how ordinary individuals, armed with specialized skills and extraordinary determination, could achieve strategic victories against seemingly insurmountable odds. Her legacy continues to inspire medical professionals, religious communities, and resistance scholars who study the intersection of professional ethics and moral courage during wartime. The precision and humanity she demonstrated during that crucial November evening remain model examples of how technical expertise can be applied in service of greater human welfare. The wine cellar of Château de Malmaison, scene of her greatest triumph, now serves as a memorial to all who risked their lives in service of human freedom. Visitors often pause to consider how one determined individual, guided by faith and armed with knowledge, changed the course of history through actions that demonstrated both clinical precision and profound moral courage. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.